Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And today I'm doing some concept art and exploring a small design for a small cyberpunk car. And normally I'm not much of a car guy. However, I do have a soft spot for old 1980s cars retrofitted with futuristic tech, and so that's the route that I'm going today. The way I'm getting started here is by creating some rough guidelines to help me plan the shape of the car when viewed from the side. This is just an easy and blocky way to indicate things like how long the hood of the car is, and how long and how tall the roof is, and then I can go in after to connect them together with angled lines to create a rough silhouette of the car. For this angle here in particular, I've used a line that has alternating 1 pixel and 2 pixel segments, and normally we'd call that a jaggy line because it looks very irregular when left like that. But to get around this, I've erased every 3rd pixel to leave sort of a dash line that still holds the original angle, but it allows your eye to kind of fill in the rest. This approach of erasing the jaggy pixels probably won't work in all cases and styles, but for this work I felt like it gave the pixeling kind of this sketchy quality. Like, not that it's suspicious, but like kind of a scrappy or like a rough drafty kind of quality that I really liked. And so I used that approach a few times throughout this work to keep some of the line work pretty loose like that. My plan here is to basically sketch out all the different sides of this vehicle, like what does it look like from the side and the front and the back, and just explore how it is to draft out all these different points of view and make sure that everything lines up as it should from those angles. And then of course on top of that, just kind of getting to explore the cool design ideas of the car as well. As I mentioned, one of my favorite, tropes in typical cyberpunk vehicle design is where you have kind of an older looking car that's been modified with these futuristic add-ons. So I started with a basic body design here, but then instead of regular tires, I'm going to go with these rotated sort of hover pads that occupy that space within the wheel well. Also at this point, I didn't really have any idea of what the purpose of this car was yet. I just knew that I wanted something that looked like kind of a more common commuter car, rather than being something too slick and flashy. And to finish off the design, I added a few more things that make it look modified, and also made sure to add in a few distinct features that could be mapped out from the other viewpoints. The next angle I'm making here is the front view, and to get started, I drew over a few reference lines from that existing design, just to indicate things like where the headlights line up, where the hood ends, and where the top of the roof is. Basically anything I already had that would be relevant in helping me with the front design. Doing something like this, you kind of realize that cars, like when viewed from the front, are not just these boxy rectangles put together. There's often a bit of tapering in the shape. So again, I tried to work a bit with the angles, and that's pretty straightforward for the angles up to the roof. But what was a little more challenging is that, at least with something like the hood of the car, you're kind of trying to capture a taper that's occurring along the depth of your line of sight. And in my selected resolution, it only gave a few pixels to indicate some kind of angle along the hood. I tried to shadow out that area just to have it kind of pop a little bit more. So there is that, I suppose. If there's anyone out there who drafts cars professionally, maybe there's another approach when you're actually working in a proper resolution and not pixel art. But if you've got any pointers, feel free to let me know. Also, I hope that the name for your job is a carchitect. I feel like that would be the right term, correct? Thankfully though, the rear design was much easier to draft out. To give myself a head start, I just copied over the front design and flipped it to its mirror image, and then erased the interior line work to basically just leave the same silhouette to fill in, but from the other side. Again, using these same guidelines, I placed the relevant features and just kind of extrapolated the design based on what we could already see from the side view. Moving up to the top design, in theory should have been easier because we now have 2 points of reference to extract guidelines from, but I actually ended up struggling a bit with it. And that was partly because of the challenges capturing depth that we were just talking about, but also because I made a small mistake during my guideline placement, which I didn't actually catch until reviewing the game tape here. So what happened is that after I created the main grid and started to draw in the roof of the car, I decided it'd be a good idea to also copy over the front design for some additional reference, but there wasn't quite enough room for it on the canvas, so I actually shifted all the layers down to make room, except the layer where I've already drawn the roof didn't actually get shifted in that move, so now it's offset entirely from the reference grid, and just somehow I didn't notice for a while. It all works out eventually, but you can kind of imagine the confusion of like thinking that you have everything where it perfectly needs to be, and not quite understanding why it feels wrong, you know? Anyway, that's my random play that cost the game kind of breakdown of that, I guess. But like I said, though, it works out anyway. But it's all kind of part of the careful planning that's required in doing something like this, I guess. Actually, what's kind of nice with this approach of drafting every side is that as you continue going, your spatial knowledge of that object continues to get more and more informed. So that constraint alone kind of helps force your hand in a lot of the choices that you need to make. And at a certain point, it feels less like having to create the object and more like you're just figuring out how to convey what you already know is there. And getting everything lined up correctly, of course. If you're someone who enjoys the constraint of working within pixel art, and since you're watching this channel, I suspect that's likely the case, then I definitely recommend some kind of drafting exercise like this, because I found it very satisfying to work through the alignment and the perspective challenges. And it feels like it kind of appealed to the same part of my brain that appreciates the challenges with constructing pixel art anyway. Even though this is pixel art also, but I hope you get what I mean. Okay, with the bottom design here, again, I got away with the trick of using the silhouette from the top view, and then I just focused on having some clear readability for the hover pads, since those are kind of the most unique thing to convey for the design at this angle. The rest of it is filled with more or less improvised mechanical detail. I tried to use a lot of symmetry and some patterns with like lines and dots just to show a few different textures. And I've also added in a few wires coming from the pads to have kind of a more chaotic or random element to break up the otherwise rigid design. Alright, after working out all those unique sides, I figured a nice way to finish off would be by making a final image of the car that's fully colored. And so I started by popping together the front view and the side view to kind of give me something with a bit of rough perspective to it. I continued shaping it into place by removing a bit of length from both of those dimensions, and then filled in the empty space between them. One of the biggest changes into this viewpoint is that since we're now viewing it from an angle, the dimensionality of the hover pads is going to show a little bit more, so they needed to be bumped out in order to convey that properly. When I'm working on something like this, and I sense that the perspective might be off and need a bit of a refinement, I'll flip the layer to its mirror image, and I find that that refreshes my view of the object and helps me spot things that may be a little bit out of place. To add the color, a lot of times I'll just use the magic wand tool to select an area inside an outline, and then fill that in with some solid color. But for this line work, because I had used so many spots with the dash lines, it wasn't actually possible to make that kind of a selection. So what I ended up doing was just creating a new layer underneath my line work layer, and then roughly painted in the color on that using a larger pencil size. And then I went back in with an eraser just to clean up any spots that needed it. I was still in the mindset of this being kind of rough and sketchy, so it actually ended up being kind of a fun and quick way to work through the coloring here. And the actual color combo here, I've selected to be kind of inspired by pizza, because I was starting to picture this as being a pizza delivery car. But then I also used the gray finish for some of the metallic components to offset some of those cheesy colors. So with that new pizza idea in mind, I thought it'd actually be kind of fun to complete this concept by drawing a couple callouts to provide a closer look at some of the details here. So the first one is a close-up of that piece of tech that's mounted near the roof of the car, which I ended up calling the delivery scanner. Maybe some kind of heavy-duty multi-purpose dash cam for spotting a delivery location. I'm not sure. Really, the idea for a callout like this, especially when it comes to the pixel art, is that it's a useful way to be able to convey what this thing looks like up close and with more detail than what the original version on the car could show, because there's quite a limited resolution there. The second callout here is some exploration as to what a unique dashboard display might look like inside the car. Including a few HUD readouts that are related to pizza delivery. Now I'm a huge fan of like retro style digital dash displays in cars. Like to me they're just focused on looking as cool and futuristic as possible, and even when there's an element of style over function, I think it's just a lot of cool design choices in this aesthetic. I've created the pixel art for this one just like making the car itself, kind of starting with the line work to find some interesting angles and shapes to pop together. And then to decorate it, I tried to think of some totally unnecessary pizza-related readouts. Like I wanted there to be a pizza temperature gauge, because you got to monitor that. Make sure it's not getting cold on your watch. And then the other one is sort of this abstract radar-style map showing the delivery location. So that one's kind of feeding off the delivery tracker cam, I guess. And all the coloring here for these callouts is just using the same color palette that I already established for the car itself. Just kind of keep everything cohesive, right? And all in all, there's a lot of ideas going on here, so I ended up organizing this work into a sort of concept sheet. So let's go ahead and take a look at the finalized concept for the Cyberpunk pizza delivery car. Here we go. Alright, as a finishing touch, I thought it'd be funny to name the car manufacturer Tomoda, because it sounded like Toyota and tomato, which is kind of perfect for a company that manufactures pizza delivery cars. Anyway, let's go ahead and close out with some CRT time. This just feels like the kind of thing that should be viewed on there, you know? So thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.